More than 2 months after residents in military housing started smelling and seeing fuel in their water, the effects of the Navy's Red Hill fuel leak are still being felt. Thousands of military and civilian families, as well as several schools, have not been able to use their tap water. And questions remain about the future of the fuel tanks and the threat it poses to Oahu's water supply. Tonight's live broadcast and live stream of insights on PBS Hawaii start now.
Aloha and welcome to Insights on PBS Hawaii. I'm Yanji Denise. In November, it was revealed that 14,000 gallons of fuel leaked from the Navy's storage tanks into a water well that serves about 93,000 residents in and around Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam. The contamination sickened families and forced many out of their homes and into hotel rooms. As the Navy works to clean out its water system, the military is appealing an emergency order to drain the fuel tanks after initially saying it would comply. Military officials say they need more time to make, quote, evidence-based and transparent decisions, unquote. Our panel tonight will discuss the current Red Hill crisis. We look forward to your participation in our show. You can email or call in your questions, and you'll find a live stream of this program at pbshawaii.org and on the PBS Hawaii Facebook page. Now to our guests. Democratic U.S. Representative Kai Kahele is in his first term in Congress. He represents Hawaii's 2nd Congressional District, which includes neighbor islands and rural parts of Oʻahu. Ernest Lau is the manager and chief engineer of the Honolulu Board of Water Supply. In his role, he is responsible for the overall direction and management of BWS. Kathleen Ho is the deputy director of environmental health for the State Department of Health. She oversees all environmental regulatory issues and protection for the state. Frances Paulino and her family live on the Aliamanu military reservation and have been living at a hotel for more than 2 months. Her husband serves in the Army, and she also volunteers with the Armed Forces Housing Advocates. Marissa Baptista is the president of the Red Hill Elementary School Parent-Teacher Student Association. She has 3 children in Hawaii Public Schools. And David Henkin is a senior attorney for Earthjustice's Honolulu office. The nonprofit focuses on public interest in regards to environmental law. Now, before we get into questions tonight, here is a brief description of the Red Hill Bulk Fuel Storage Facility. It was built underground in the 1940s and is comprised of 20 tanks that can hold 250 million gallons of fuel. The Navy has argued that this facility is needed for the nation's self-defense. However, there is high concern because the tanks sit 100 feet above an aquifer that provides water to residents from Moanalua to Hawaii Kai. The Navy declined our invitation to participate tonight, but in a statement it says in part, quote, "Our work and our progress are based on science and data, and all of this is done in close coordination with the Hawaiʻi Department of Health, the EPA, and other partners and stakeholders. We have a long-term sampling and monitoring plan to ensure we keep the water safe." We thank all of you for being here tonight, and Kathleen, I want to start with you and the status of the cleanup. How is that going right now? And overall, how have you found the Navy to be in terms of transparency and partners in this whole process?
Thank you for that question. I look at the cleanup in 2 ways. First, it's the distribution system, is how to get people back into their homes. And the second part is the recovery of the Red Hill shaft. So when we're talking about the distribution system, getting people back in their homes, we are in the process of getting one set of one zone cleared to be occupied. Another set is right behind it. When we're talking about the distribution system, what we're talking about is flushing the system, waiting 24 hours, taking a sample, waiting 72 hours, and flushing the system again. So in that analysis, we can see whether there is any petroleum left in the system. That's for the safety of bringing safe drinking water back into the home. As to the Red Hill recovery, we believe it's going well. It started about 2 weeks ago, I believe. They're taking water out of the shaft, putting it into the GAC, the granulated activated carbon system, testing the water twice, once before it goes into the first GAC, once when it leaves that GAC, and then another time before it goes into the Halava stream, which is permitted by a NPDES permit.
And how have you found the Navy to be in terms of partners in this process? Have you found them to be transparent?
I find them to we're trying to work cooperatively in getting safe water to people's homes. We are working in a group of partners with the federal, state, and EPA, the state of Hawaii, and the Navy, trying to work cooperatively in getting people back into the homes in a expeditious manner.
Ernie, let's talk about the impact not only for those 93,000 residents that we outlined at the top, but also for the entire water system. What is the status of the rest of the drinking water? We know that several of those wells have been shut down, it sounds like indefinitely. What's the status there, and do you anticipate being able to open those again?
We have currently 3 wells that supply our water system, which is separate from the Navy's water system. So the Halava Shaft, which represents about 20% of the supplies, supplying Honolulu from the Halava Mauna Loa area all the way out to Hawaii. And our Aiea and Halava wells that also supply a smaller system in the Aiea Halava area, but that represents about 50% of the supply. Right now, because we know that the aquifer in the area below and around the Red Hill facility is contaminated with fuel, and we see what's happened to their drinking water source. It's very heavily contaminated with petroleum. So because we tap water or pump water from the same connected aquifer, we can't really risk sending fuel contaminated water into our water system. So our wells, as a precaution, are shut down. And what we think this shutdown could extend into potentially years.
How many years? And if that system is offline for that long, what does that mean for those of us who rely on that water day to day?
At this point, we don't know how long. What we hope that in working with the Health Department and the EPA, and hopefully the Navy will be very aggressive into doing the investigation of the nature and extent of the groundwater contamination in that area and determine where groundwater might be flowing, especially if we start pumping our wells again, will we draw the water across Halava Valley into our wells and send it through the pipes, our pipes, into our water system to our customers. So we don't want to do that. We are looking at drilling replacement wells to replace the capacity that's currently not available to our customers. What's going to happen, Yunji, is right now we're doing okay. We have enough wells and capacity from other wells that serve Honolulu and in the Pearl Harbor area to meet the demands of our customers in Honolulu. But when we get into the summer and when it gets hot and dry, when water use increases, and that usually happens every year, are we going to be able to keep up with the demand for water by our customers? And if our supply doesn't keep up with demand, then the effect will be low pressures, maybe areas of the water system could run out of water. So we're going to be asking our customers to conserve water, especially when we get into the summer, and to not waste it, but to use it very carefully. And we may be coming out with specific amounts that we need them to reduce their water usage. So that's kind of the situation with the Board of Water Supply.
Frances, I want to hear from you and what your family has been through over the last few months. What have you been told about when you might be able to go back home, and what has this time been like?
We don't know when we're going to be able to go back home. This time has just been unexplainable. Unless you're living through it and you're dealing with it on a daily basis, it's kind of hard to put it into words. There's a lot of people on the ground that I deal with on a daily basis. We're struggling to hold it together as moms, as fathers, as service members. This is just one of these things where you talk about resilience, and we're the epitome of resilience right now because we're trying to navigate things on a daily basis with not really having a concise idea of what is truly happening to us in the future.
You know, I asked Kathleen at the top about what her interactions have been like with the Navy. What have your interactions been like, and what kind of information are they giving you?
Me, I'm a people person. I want to stay away from that because I'm more concerned about what my people, my family, my friends, my neighbors, my community is dealing with. I don't have interactions with the Navy, to be honest. I just have interactions with the people that I care about, and I want to make sure see a productive life going forward.
Marissa, I want to follow up with you. You're a mom who has a child who's in one of the affected schools, and I know you're speaking to us also in your role with the PTSA. Tell us about what it's been like for families who have kids who may not even be military families or live on those bases, but are still affected, and what it's been like for the kids who go to those schools.
Yeah, I mean, to hear from Ernie say that there is no timeline of when this will be resolved is a gut punch, right? I was there on December 1st when they had the AMR Community Center meeting, and there was just a lot of, lack of information coming out. And we asked, what's going to be the plan? What's your timeline? And, they're like, similar to what Frances is saying, there's just so much COVID fatigue already in place. And then to pile onto that, this water contamination issue and a lack of communication from the Navy. I mean, there are daily WebExes, but they're very quick. They give you hyperlinks, and those hyperlinks have highly technical information that the layperson won't understand. So a lot of people in the community just feel defeated.
So tell us about what it's like for the kids who are actually in those schools, because the schools are open, the kids are there, but how is this affecting their learning experience right now?
So, I mean, one of the amazing things about Red Hill is we have an amazing principal. Kamari Moss has done wonderful things at this school. She's able to keep the morale of the students and the staff high. But, they do have challenges. They're already, being carted. These students are having to go to and fro from Waikiki or the hotels they're staying in, be bused all the way back out here to Moanalua, Red Hill area. They also, they don't have access to their water. So they're drinking, they're washing their hands with the potable water that the military is providing in these wash stations. But it's gotten so bad that they've actually taken Home Depot buckets, placed a spigot in them, and that's where the kids are washing their hands in the bathroom because it's too much to actually push one of those water tank systems into the bathroom. Teachers don't have access to the water in their classrooms, so they're having to use those water gallons, put some sort of contraption on top, and pretty much just squeeze the water out for students to have access to water. It impacts their lunch. It impacts every part of their school life.
Congressman Kahele, I want to get your thoughts on all of this. There is so much to talk about, but I want to get to the $400 million that could go toward addressing this from the federal government. If that money does go through, where would it be spent? How would it be allocated? And what could it be done? What could it do to help solve this crisis?
Well, thanks, Yunji and PBS Insights for having us on tonight. And my hearts go out to Frances and Marissa and the thousands of military families and their children. It is infuriating to me. I don't know how else to describe it. This is a nightmare that our military families have been living for months now, and it is absolutely unacceptable that they're being treated this way. In regards to your question, first of all, kudos and mahalos to Senator Schatz's Congressman Case, our appropriators on the Senate Appropriations Committee and the House Appropriations Committee, who worked really hard over the last week to 2 weeks to convince their colleagues to work with the appropriators to fund a significant amount of money, $403 million in the FY22 budget that the Congress should be passing in a few weeks to address this issue. Part of that, those resources will go to cover the hundreds of millions of dollars that the military has spent up until now. Just think about that. Almost $500 million has been spent on this crisis. Imagine what we could do with that money. $100 million, like Senator Schatz said, will go to complying with the state's emergency order and defueling the facility and making the necessary operational upgrades that are identified by the third-party assessor that should be completed by April 27th, which will then be presented to the Department of Health allow them to sign off on it and commence the defueling of this facility. So, it's not just covering all the expenses of the military, it should also be covering the expenses of the Department of Health, of the Board of Water Supply, of the Department of Education, the University of Hawaii. There's a lot of money that other state and city and county agencies and the Board of Water Supply has spent, and they need to be made whole. They need to have that money covered. There's also hundreds of stories of military families having to front their hotel rooms, front their meals, families in Iroquois Point that aren't military families that have had to spend their money and their resources and the water provided for their families. This is a major crisis, Yunji, and it just really, really upsets me that we are here in February. What started on November 20th is still happening, and there is no end in sight, like Ernie said.
I want to get, you made headlines in the paper this morning talking about the camera situation there. What did you find out when you went down there in terms of the surveillance? If we could get to that quickly, because we have so much to talk about. But I want to get that to people who may not have read that article.
Yes. So first of all, I've now gone back to Red Hill multiple times. Took Ernest Lau down there to the lower access tunnel, who had never been in there before. And every time I go back, I see things that I look for that I didn't see the last time. And specifically on a tour I did about 2 tours ago, I looked for video cameras throughout the tunnel system. There were 2 perfectly positioned cameras, one at the top of the lower access tunnel, just outside tank 20, that would have clearly showed you what happened on May 6th, and another camera sitting right outside the November 20th incident that would have showed the operator, the rover that hit the pipe that caused the fuel to then drain into the lower access tunnel. Went down to the operations control room, asked to see the live footage. They were unable to show me that footage. They could show me other cameras, but not those specific cameras. So then I asked, well, how many cameras in the lower access tunnel? There's over 90 cameras throughout the entire facility. I said, well, why can't we see the cameras? Well, I submitted an RFI. They didn't have an answer at the time. I submitted a request for information to the Navy. Took about 3 weeks to get that answer back. We just got it back. And the answer is that a contractor severed the electrical wiring to those camera systems in early January 2021, 6 months prior to May 6th, and a year later they had not been fixed. And so almost 45 cameras were rendered completely unusable and inoperable when these incidents happen. And that just goes to reaffirm what many of us have already believed, that the United States Navy cannot and should not operate this facility, because they have proven time and time again that as a national strategic asset, how important this is to the nation, they're not able to manage it. They're not able to run it. And we need to shut this facility down.
David, that is such a troubling revelation. There's a question here from Leanna writing in from Hōʻula. She says, why is the state of Hawaii allowing the military to flagrantly disregard the order to shut down the tanks? You're involved in the legal fight representing the Sierra Club. Tell us a little bit about where that stands right now and what that fight exactly is.
Yeah, thank you. Where that stands is after testifying before Congress that the Department of Health had issued a lawful order to defuel the tanks and that they were going to comply with that order, the Navy turned around and has filed not 1, but 2 lawsuits, one in federal court, one in state court. And that's where things stand. But it's really important for the folks watching tonight to understand that just because the Navy filed an appeal does nothing to affect the emergency order that the Department of Health issued. So the requirement to defuel those tanks and to do so expeditiously and safely remains in effect. And we have some concerns about the Navy basically slow walking that process and trying to drag it out. And what they're trying to do is relitigate something that was already resolved in an extensive evidentiary hearing that happened in December, where ultimately the Department of Health concluded that this facility poses an imminent peril to all of us. And frankly, you don't need to be an expert to understand that. The facts on the ground, just speak louder than any analysis, which is somehow, this incident that happened in November involved 14,000, could be more, we don't know, gallons of fuel coming out of a fire suppression line. How does that happen? And the way that happens is this is an ancient facility. It was built in the 1940s. They have operator error causing spills all the time. A modern facility would not be built that way. So, the Navy already did a risk analysis back in 2018 that concluded that the likelihood of an accident like happened in November, an accident of up to 30,000 gallons, twice as much, happening in any given year is over 27%, so more than 1 in 4 odds. Once you go to 5 years, that goes to 80%, 4 in 5. By the time you get to 10 years, it's 96%. We can't allow this sort of existential threat to be hanging over our drinking water. I mean, the reason that our service members were able to be evacuated from their homes and go to Waikiki and other hotels to get fresh drinking water is that fortunately this accident wasn't big enough also to poison the wells and Florida water supply. We can't wait for that to happen. Just imagine if something like this had happened and some terrorist or foreign government had done what the Navy accidentally did, you would imagine that their response would be, vigorous and fierce. And we need them to stand up for us and defend us just as much when it's because of an inadvertent, accidental poisoning of our water supply. That's what it means to defend the people of this island.
Yeah, I think David's correct, and that is that we do have to have vigorous enforcement of our emergency order, and he is correct in saying that in fact the emergency order is still in place, and we, the state of Hawaii and the people of the state of Hawaii, expect the Navy to comply with our order, and in addition, when this happened in November 28th. A day later, when the residents of the state of the Navy residents and the distribution system smelt the water and complained about the fact that there was oil, fuel smells coming out of their water and taste, the Department of Health didn't hesitate but to issue a health advisory informing everybody not to drink the water. The Department of Health is really trying to do a vigorous enforcement of the emergency order and protect the people of the state of Hawaii.
How long could that enforcement take, though, Kathleen, if you could address that? If the Navy is filing these lawsuits and sort of slow walking, is what David was saying, how long could that fuel sit there?
Well, I mean, the emergency order requires them to do certain things within 30 days. And then from there, it's kind of a cascading effect. And so we will be vigilant in enforcing our order. I hope that it will be done in a expeditious fashion, but we want to do it in a safe way. We want to make sure that the fuel can be removed in a safe manner. We don't want to have another catastrophic event. So in that respect, we will do it we'll hire our experts and we'll make sure that it's done safely.
Ernie, I want to get to you. There's 2 questions here. Mary from Mililani wants to know, what does the constant flushing do to the water table? Is it wasting water? Could it lead to a shortage? And Angelica in Haleiwa says, how much water is being discharged by the Navy every day? There are some concerns, given what has gone on, about this flushing process. What can you tell us about that?
So from what I understand from the press coverage and from the Department of Health, they're flushing at a rate of about 5 million gallons a day. That's typically around the range of what they would normally pump into their water system for drinking purposes. But obviously, because their source is contaminated, they have to discharge it into the stream under a permit from the health department. So that in a year, that's over almost 1 billion gallons of water. So that's being right now wasted into the environment. It is the aquifer is able to support that, although we do not like to see water wasted like that. But really, it's also water that's fuel contaminated. So we want to be careful about even thinking about reusing that water elsewhere. So that would be like moving the problem from where it's at Red Hill and moving it to another location, perhaps in the Halawa Valley. And we would oppose that type of uses. We need to watch the aquifer very carefully, and working with the Commission on Water Resources, they need to monitor the condition of the aquifer. If the Navy pumps at a higher rate, could it have negative effects on overpumping the aquifer in that area? That's a question that needs to be monitored continuously.
Frances, I understand that some military families actually went to Washington to try to gain some attention to this issue and demand better treatment and more testing. What needs to be done for your family and for others in your circumstance for you to feel safe to move back into your homes?
On a personal aspect, I don't think I'll ever feel safe to move back home, regardless of what's done. I just feel like the transparency from the start and where we're at now is putting me in a position where I need to make some really heavy decisions for my family. And I don't think we're going to be in a position to make that decision to go back. I do have a question for Representative Kahele, if I'm allowed to ask that right now. We spoke about the funding and all the money that's going in, and you had mentioned, we're fronting the money for our hotel bills and stuff like that. So I'm not a unique situation, and I do have this question to ask on behalf of myself and other families that have been affected. My family and others are nearing $20,000 in debt for unreimbursed housing expenses, while privatized housing companies are still continuing to collect rent from the Department of Defense for having us in uninhabitable homes that we haven't lived in for over 70 days. Why is that? Why am I in a position of being in debt? If you can answer that, I would greatly appreciate it.
Thank you, Frances, for the question. You absolutely should not be in debt for that. You should not be out a single penny for this crisis and how it has affected your families and many other families. We'll speak directly to Admiral Paparo about this. I mean, there has to be a mechanism for military reimbursements to their families. One of the complex situations is you have the United States Army Pacific under the command of General Flynn, who runs the Aliyah Manu housing area and everything that the Army controls. And then you have Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam, which is Halsey, Caitlin, everything on Hickam, Pearl Harbor, and all those associated housing communities. So you have two different entities that process funding reimbursements, but I'll get down to the bottom of it and just have anyone call my office line here in Hilo. It's 808-746-6220. And I promise you, we'll get you an answer.
Okay. Marissa, I want to get to you. What have you heard about plans for the public schools and for your school specifically when it comes to being able to let the kids have access to that tap water again?
Gosh, there haven't been any. I'll tell you honestly, when this initially happened, there was discussion around, do you close the school? At what point do you say this school has to be closed and children need to be rerouted to other schools that don't have this issue? I've always thought it was interesting that we have so many public schools, not on state lines, but actually on military lines. And to, Representative Kahele's point, Iroquois Point is primarily, I want to say it's probably a good mix of military and not the civilian, non-military. Red Hill is 70% military, but we still have a 30% population that's not. And, we have this concern that Hawaii is a transient state, right? So we'll have families PCS in every 3 to 4 years. But what about the families that are local here that don't have this, this ability to just sort of pick up and move? And not to make light of that, but just, they bought, they're invested, they live here. We've gone 2,000 years with Kanaka Mo'olelo not having this issue of, contaminated water. And now we have this issue that we have to face. So to your point, to your question about access to the water, there has been no update. We're still just on potable water and on water bottles.
Stan in Nainahaina has sort of the $1 million question. Congressman, I would start with you on this one. Where will the fuel go when the tanks are emptied? You have said that this should absolutely be drained. If that is the case, we know that this is very important to strategic defense, and that's the Navy's whole argument here. So if not there, then where?
So there's there's a few options. The first thing is the tanks that hold this fuel, gravity flow down to Pearl Harbor and Hickam to above ground holding tanks that can't take the entire Red Hill facilities amount. But while you refill those tanks and those tanks fill planes and ships and everything going through Pearl Harbor and Hickam, you eventually will deplete the fuel. But one option is to transfer that fuel back to Par Hawaii and have it stored there. Another option is bringing it down to Pearl Harbor and loading it into oilers and taking it out to sea. So there is a mechanism to defuel these tanks. It's not rocket science. In terms of what INDOPACOM does, there are well over 50 sites throughout the entire INDOPACOM region that can hold above ground fuel. There's oilers that can hold fuel at sea. So there are other options. And I think at its core, the people of Hawaii need to ask the Navy, why should the 1 million residents on the island of Oʻahu bear 250 million gallons of fuel sitting barely 100 feet above its most precious water aquifer and the nation's strategic fuel reserve? It shouldn't. It can't. And we shouldn't bear the brunt of the Navy's strategic fuel reserve on the island of Oʻahu. And so the INDOPACOM commanders need to figure out how to distribute this fuel throughout the Indo-Pacific so that it can meet the military strategic fuel reserve.
David, just to give people a reminder, November's leak is not the first time. Can you tell us a little bit about the track record here and what we may or may not know about past leaks?
Oh, absolutely. What we don't know about past leaks probably fill volumes. What we do know is the facility was built in the 1940s, and already by the later 1940s, there were documented leaks out of this facility. That risk assessment that I mentioned earlier that the Navy did concluded that every year there's thousands of gallons that are just sort of leaking out of the facility and oozing into the soil underneath the tank field. And that, as Congressman Kahele just mentioned, is 100 feet over our sole source aquifer that provides fresh drinking water to most of the island. I'm going to point to one specific leak that kind of is emblematic of just the mystery, the sort of frightening mystery that surrounds this facility. In May of 2001, there was a leak that the Navy originally reported as being of 1,600 gallons. And they said of those 1,600 gallons that leaked, they recovered all but 38 gallons. Okay, so far so good. Well, after that leak, they have these sensors in the ground to sense petroleum contamination. Those sensors started going off the charts. So they said, no, only 38 gallons leaked. Well, now the operating theory that the Navy has is, no, it wasn't 1,600 gallons. It might have been 19,000 gallons that leaked. And somehow through this kind of crazy maze of pipes and things got into a drain, and from the drain it went from here, and then it went from there, and eventually it ends up in a fuel suppression line that allowed someone accidentally to bang into it, and all of a sudden you've got contamination of the Red Hill shaft. So, the bottom line is we don't know how much leaking has been happening. We don't know where it's been going. The fact that we were able to detect in such a visceral way with families turning on their tap and their kitchen smells like a gas station, that finally set off the alarm bells. But this has been going on literally for decades. And in the legal proceedings, we represent the Sierra Club. And with the Board of Water Supply, we have been saying for years, you need to defuel these tanks. It should not have taken this type of a crisis to finally get it going, but we're happy to finally see some movement on this. And that's the simple fact. You need to get the fuel out of these tanks, and then we can have long, slow conversations with the Navy. They can take as long as they want to evaluate what they want to do next, but we need to get the threat away from our water supply.
Ernie, I know that you have been saying for a long time, sounding the alarm since that 2014 incident that these tanks should be drained. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, Yunji, I first became aware of this back in 2014 with the leak of 27,000 gallons from tank number 5. And for the past 8 years, we've been trying to sound the alarm bells to whoever would listen to us.
Icon on there.
Times at the Department of Water Supply, we were kind of like the sole voice out there. And unfortunately, we were advocating for prevention of further contamination. Unfortunately, now we're in a crisis situation dealing with a release that's impacted up to 93,000 people, and my heart goes out to them. The history of leaks of this facility, 72, and with the recent leaks, maybe 76 documented leaks, the number is close to 200,000 gallons of fuel that have been released out of these tanks and pipes and are someplace trapped between that 100 feet of rock below the bottom of the tanks and the top of the water table, or has actually reached the water table and moved elsewhere. So that's the risk we're dealing with right now. And the bottom line, they got to listen to the emergency order. The Navy needs to defuel the facility as soon as quickly possible and never bring that fuel back to this facility. It is an unacceptable level of risk to our drinking water resources for the island of Oahu. So there's no negotiation of this. And Kathy Ho, Health Department, I stand your position. Don't give in. Stick to your guns. Hold the Navy accountable. They're going to delay. They're going to try to get out of this. And their tactic that they've used for the past 8 years is delay, deflect, and defer. So we cannot let them get away with this. Or the poor families that are suffering right now, there'll be more. There'll be thousands of families suffering in Honolulu and Aiea and Halawa. So please, Navy, do the right thing. Defuel the facility and get it out of there as soon as possible.
Kathleen, please go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Ernie. This is not my first experience with the Navy. In the 90s, I was on a team of lawyers that worked on the return of Kaho'olawe. I was brought in specifically to do to work on the MOA to clean up Kaho'olawe. So I understand the workings of the Navy and how they can sometimes drag their feet, and how they are sometimes not forthcoming in their work. But I see this Kaho'olawe and Red Hill has some parallels in that we are all stewards of the land and the water, and we have to take care of all of that. As we did in Kaho'olawe, we got it back. We were able to clean up parts of it. There's still a lot of Kaho'olawe that needs to be done on Kaho'olawe. And this water, we issued an order against the Navy. We're asking them to defuel. They have to do it. They made commitments to the people of the state of Hawaii. They made commitments to our congressional delegation that they were going to defuel. They just have to defuel so that we can make whole the aquifer.
I want to get to Frances. There's a comment here from Kaylee who says, what about long-term health care? When my military children are a certain age, they will be released from military health care. What happens if they are critically damaged as adults? Who is going to pay for their medical damages? I'm interested to hear about the conversation that you are having with other families about the exposures that you may have had already, and just, if you can give folks a sense of your day-to-day. I know your kids are very young, and I can't imagine what it's like to be living in a hotel with such young children.
This question's heavy because we don't know what the long-term effects are. I've asked this question. There's no studies. There's nothing to indicate what we're looking at long-term. We're personally dealing with something that we might have to look long-term with my son right now. So I don't know how to properly answer that question because this is something that a lot of families are going to have to be navigating. And these are hard decisions that we're going to have to face because I'm not too sure if we'll be given the proper medical attention that we need. I don't know if we will. So again, with the construes of like everything that we're having to think about, this is the top thing that we're thinking about. How do I protect my kids long term? Am I going to be protected? Are they going to do the right thing and help us? I don't know how to answer that question.
David, what is the recourse for these families from a legal perspective? How do they proceed?
Yeah, well, that is an excellent question. My practice focuses on environmental law, and I know that there are others in the legal community who could answer that question far better than I can. All I could say is that it's this type of tragedy that's happened to these families, and people need to understand how much their lives have been upended. When we were in the contested case over the emergency order, the Navy said, "Oh, we've solved the problem. We're providing bottled water and we moved them to hotels. Everything's fine. And we put on a number of folks as witnesses like Frances who have just suffered through this nightmare and seen their entire lives upended. And that's why, you know, what Earthjustice and Sierra Club are doing are trying to do everything that we can through the legal process to make sure that no family ever has to experience this again. And as the Congressman Kahele said, that means getting the fuel out of the tanks.
Marissa, please weigh in.
I mean, the numbers, right? If they say they're looking at data, the data says at least 5,900 people have, you know, written in and said they're having issues with nausea, burning, rashes. Even back on December 1st, people were talking about, you know, there were women that were pregnant on the verge of giving birth. And they're like, you know, we ingested this water. What are you going to do when we have side effects or children have side effects from this exposure? And they were gaslit. They were like, well, maybe it's that, maybe it's something else. And I just had a conversation with a parent today. I was like, you know, you're going to have to stay on the people, hold people accountable to, you know, do the right thing. If this is the way that the Navy is going to treat our armed forces, what happens if we do have some type of attack or some terrorist activity happen? Who's going to protect us? Everyone is sick. And it's not just the military, it's going to be the residents of Hawaii when eventually this water does spread out, or when we're all impacted over the summer. People are not feeling the hurt now, but we're very much we'll wait and see. And by the time we see, it'll be too late.
Congressman, there's a question here from Jackie in Kapolei. It says, can Hawaii's congressional delegation request an executive order by President Biden to shut down the facility? What are the conversations like that you're having in Washington to get this done? Because we know that there's folks here on the ground, and then there's obviously higher ups where you sit.
Absolutely. There, Yunji, is two ways to shut down this facility if the Pentagon, the Department of Defense, and Navy will not do it on their own willingly. One way is the President of the United States to send an executive order. Kathy mentioned Kaho'olawe. This is exactly how President George H.W. Bush stopped the bombing on Kaho'olawe. He sent a one-paragraph message from the White House to the SecDef, stop bombing, and that began a sequence of events that eventually returned Kaho'olawe back to Hawaii. So the president can do that. Our delegation is in touch with the White House, with the Chief of Staff, Ron Klain, but that has not happened yet. The second way to do it, Congress acts. You do it through statute, and that is introducing federal legislation in the United States Congress to shut down the Red Hill facility. Those are really the only two ways. Is Congress taking action, or the executive branch taking action if the Department of Defense is unwilling to do it.
And is that a conversation that is ongoing right now?
You will find out very, very soon, Yunji.
In television, we call that a tease. We'd love a little bit more.
We will have a press conference tomorrow at 11 o'clock a.m. at the Hawaii State Capitol. And we will have that very discussion. And we have put out a media release and for all the people of Hawaii to tune in tomorrow at 11 o'clock in the morning.
Okay, we'll tune into that. Ernie, I want to get to you. The longer that fuel sits there, as David outlined, the more of a risk that is. You know, there is this feeling that because the wells have been shut down and the cleanup is going on, that somehow things may be sort of stable or safe. But what are your concerns, you know, as that fuel continues to sit there and the legal wrangling goes on?
You know, this pattern by the Navy, and don't get me wrong, I support their effort to defend our freedoms. But this pattern of, oh yeah, we've taken care of it. This is an isolated case. We're cleaning it up. It's all good. And then something else happens. So the longer the fuel sits there, the risk, like David pointed out, of further leaks, even larger leaks, is real. So that risk of further contamination of the aquifer is real. And the potential, if large leaks occur, that it could even travel further and impact more wells of the Board of Water Supply or the Navy is also real. And then let's not forget, the fuel will flow someplace because the water in Hawaii flows from Mauka to the ocean, to the Makai. And where will it end up? Will it end up eventually in Pearl Harbor, into the waters of Pearl Harbor, and contaminate Pearl Harbor even further? So the environmental impact is real. So the best thing is to eliminate that risk by defueling, but they have to deal with the damage they've already done to the Navy families and to the environment, to the aquifer.
Yanji, can I point out something that I think Ernie
Yes, of
touched on?
course.
This is really important. There are 20 tanks in this facility. 2 of these tanks have nothing in them. They are and have been taken offline, tanks number 1 and tanks number 19. So that's 18 tanks left. At any given time, 4 tanks have nothing in them. They are going through the clean, inspect, repair program that the Navy has been doing for quite some time and has been put in place even after the administrative order of consent. Once you do a clean, inspect, repair, the next time they need to look at that tank is 20 years later under the American Petroleum Institute guidelines. However, 3 of those tanks, tanks number 3, tank number 4, and tank number 11 have never been touched in 39 years. Tank number 3 and 4, 39 years, tank number 11, 41 years. You have fuel sitting in tank number 11 right now, and they have not even looked at that tank since I was 6 years old. That is a problem, and that is why these tanks need to be defueled. We shouldn't even have fuel in tanks 3, 4, and 11 right now.
I mean, Kathleen, given that track record, given what happened in 2014, how has the Navy been allowed to operate this facility for as long as it has?
They, there wasn't a permitting facility. Now it's permitted. We did not have any regulatory authority over it until they were required to have permitting. We're permitting them now, or it's in the permit process. We issued the emergency order to defuel. They have to defuel. We're acting as quickly as we can. We will be vigilant about making them defuel. That's what I have to say. Thanks.
Eric in Kailua has a question, and David, I'd love you to take this one. Is it easy for the Navy to deflect because the problem is in Hawaii? What if this had happened in New York or LA? Just interested to know if you think that because it is in Hawaii, maybe it's off the radar for a lot of the conversations that are happening on the continent.
I think that's absolutely correct. Unfortunately, the military does many things here in Hawaii that would be completely unacceptable, unheard of on the mainland. I've spent years in litigation against the Army doing live fire training at Makua Military Reservation, literally across Farrington Highway from a beach where families play and people are fishing for subsistence. You would never, never, never see that in the continental United States. So I think that's absolutely correct. I think the other thing is that, we've all spoken to, or many of us have spoken to, we appreciate the military. We appreciate what they do. And I think one of the corollaries to that is that we give them the benefit of the doubt. I mean, their duty is sworn to protect us. And so you want to look to them and you want to trust them. And here in Hawaii, we've just experienced personally that trust has been shattered. I mean, you just can't trust the Navy anymore to look out for our best interests. Fool me once, shame on you. We had that fuel spill that Ernie mentioned back in 2014 of 27,000 gallons. They said, we'll fix it. It will never happen again. Well, now fast forward to 2021 and the water supply is poisoned. So, enough already. It's, so we can't wait for the folks on the mainland to be concerned about us. We have to be concerned about ourselves. And I would respectfully add to what the congressman had to say. Presidential order, yes, President Biden should step in as commander-in-chief. Congress acting, absolutely. We need our elected officials to stand up for us. But number 3, the rule of law. I mean, this is America, and the military is not above the law. And the law here, the federal law here says the Navy has to comply with the state regulations, has to comply with the emergency order. And that's why Earthjustice is fighting in federal and state court to make sure that happens.
Frances, I see you nodding. Please go ahead.
So we're keep talking about 2014 and the leak that happened then. So I know that Congress has turned over their oversight of the Red Hill to the Navy. And in 2014, Congress asked the Navy to remedy the leak that was occurring, and they never followed through with that, including the fact that most recently they failed to shut down the Red Hill when they've been directed. And now that they're being given millions to produce a proper solution after failing to comply what guarantees that the substantial amount of money that they are giving the Navy will force their hand to follow through on a request, and where's the oversight going to be that holds them accountable? So if congressmen can answer this question, I would love that, please.
Thanks, Francis, for the question. Yeah, we are, and have conveyed to the highest levels of Pentagon leadership of holding people responsible for what happened here. I think one of the most egregious things that has happened, of the many egregious things over the last few months, is when on Sunday night, November 28th, when the Navy decided, or someone decided, to remove the Red Hill water system from the Navy's water system because of the countless amount of phone calls, fuel smells in homes, babies with rashes, chemical burns, going to the hospital, Tripler Medical Center. They turned off the Red Hill well Sunday night, November 28th, but they didn't tell anyone. And even as of 2:00 p.m. in the afternoon of Monday, November 29th, hours before Kathleen Ho and the Department of Health put out their advisory to stop drinking the water, the Navy still said, the commander of Joint Base Pearl Harbor still said the water was safe to drink, that him and his people that they work with were drinking it, they were not closing down schools. And they knew something was wrong with the Red Hill well. And when faced with a decision to put out an advisory and tell people to stop consuming the water, they didn't do that. So people consumed water throughout Sunday night, throughout all day on Monday. People should be held responsible. People should be relieved of command right now. And that is not happening. And that is unacceptable.
Marissa, what are you telling the kids about how long they're going to have to be in this circumstance?
I've talked to parents that live in AMR, and I think what Francis said is that they're resilient, right? They're finding workarounds. They're trying to keep their lifestyles as normal as possible, keeping a routine for the kids. So they may have the hotels, but there are plenty of families that, are choosing to stay in their homes because that's the routine that their kids sort of flourish under, not the sort of the carting back and forth. And that's pretty much all you can say. But, to Representative Kahele's, thoughts on the communication, I learned about the contamination not from the state, but from a principal at Nimitz Elementary sent out an email at 8:00 on the 29th to the community and said, hey, guess what? We as a school have decided that we are going to stop providing water to the kids. We're taping up all of the water stations. We're going to have water bottles brought into the school. That was at 8:00 on that Monday. And then, communication came out from all of the other schools, some of the other schools, because there's 5 that are affected. But this whole miscommunication and lack of communication, and, even now, parents don't know who to believe. Like, are we listening to what we hear on Facebook, on the news, from our public officials? Everyone's speaking a different song, like we don't know who exactly to believe and what to follow. And so you kind of just stay within your community and you figure out what works for the person next to you and you follow suit.
And Ernie, I saw you nodding there as well.
Going back to Francis's question, which I think is extremely important. How do we hold the Navy accountable over time? Because I think the situation with the Red Hill Field facility will take a long time to resolve. But it's important for all of us to stay on top of this issue and keep the pressure on. And what is vital, and I appreciate Congressman Kahele and our congressional delegation doing what they're doing, but we really need them to do more and to continue to exert pressure through Congress, through money, through the budget, but also passing laws that require them to shut it down. The Navy doesn't listen to us. And in fact, I heard an admiral refer to the people that live here as the locals. And I really was offended by that. That's not being respectful. That is not treating people with aloha. So we need our congressional delegation to stay on this issue. This is a federal facility. We need Congress to stay on this issue and to protect our people and the resources of Hawaii.
We have less than 1 minute. Francis, I want to give you the last word tonight. What would you like the Navy and the public to know?
First of all, I want my ohana in Oʻahu to know how blessed that we are to be here. We don't choose to come here, but we have come here, and my husband is a Pacific Islander, so I know how much this resonates to the island and in themselves, and I know how much this is affecting our military community too. So basically, we and I just want this to be over. We want this to be done right. We want transparency through it all. And we just want to get to a place where we don't have to continue to live like this, because one, mental health is a big deal and people are struggling with that right now. We're beyond the breaking point. And I'm just praying for everybody. You know, God has saved me and kept me in a position that I am. So reach out to the Lord. That's just my personal opinion. And I'm so proud of everybody for being so resilient. And I pray for you all on a daily basis. So God bless you guys.
Thank you so much, and thank all of you for joining us tonight. Of course, we do thank our guests, U.S. Representative Kai Kahele, Board of Water Supply Manager Ernest Lau, Kathleen Ho from the Department of Health, military family member Frances Paulino, Red Hill Elementary PTSA President Marissa Baptista, and David Henkin, Senior Attorney at Earthjustice. Next week on Insights, a closer look at the lingering health effects after someone catches COVID-19. We'll hear from medical experts and a virus survivor about what's commonly referred to as long-haul COVID. Please do join us then. I'm Yanji Denise for Insights on PBS Hawaii. Aloha.